I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Are you ready to win at the game of life? Well, throw out that rulebook and get down to the business of being the best and most authentic version of you. Welcome to the Human Design Podcast. We're changing the rules around success, abundance, purpose, love, and life, where we're creating a planet where everyone can thrive in a world that loves and supports each other. I'm your host, Emma Dunwoody, a qualified master coach, human design expert, podcaster, and entrepreneur that is living the life of my dreams, breaking all the rules while doing it, making a huge impact, and living my design and manifesting miracles on the daily. Join me as I break down and simplify everything you need to live in alignment with your human design, teach you how to recondition your unconscious mind for greatness, and to take back your power so you can manifest your heaven on earth and serve the rest of the planet at the same time. It's time to give up the fear and step into your highest potential, to reach for the stars, to know and live your greatness. It's what you deserve, and it's what the planet really needs from you. So buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Before you start listening to this amazing transits episode, I want you to stop everything that you're doing and listen to this. And if you're wondering where that familiar Aussie accent is and you're wondering if you're on the wrong podcast, don't worry, you're in the right place. You're talking to Taylor. Hey, how you doing? And I asked Emma if I could come on and share this with you guys. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've absolutely heard us talk about this. And it's something that I'm super passionate about in our business. And so I wanted to come share it with you. So if you use human design in your business in any way, if you're a coach or you want to use human design in your business, you have to hear this because it's responsible for so much of the growth that we've had this year, and I just can't keep my mouth shut about it anymore. So you've heard us probably talk about this BodyGraph chart software that we use, and it's responsible for bringing more than 15,000 new leads into our business this year alone. Why does this matter for you? Well, if you use or plan to use human design in your business in any way, what you're going to find is that you're sending people to another major website or somebody else's platform for them to get their chart, when instead it could all be happening right in your own business. With the BodyGraph chart software, not only can you host your own chart software on your website so that you don't have to send people away, but you can also add them to your email list. You can follow up with human design information or any other information that's relevant to your business. You can build reading report tools where you can put your own information in to guide them through their journey in a way that is branded and unique to you. This is one of the most brilliant ways to build your own customer journey and to connect with people and to build your business and to create transformation for your clients and anyone that enters your business. We are obsessed, as you can probably hear in my voice, with this software. Like I said, it's brought over 15,000 new amazing people into our community just this year alone. And I don't know what we would do without it, to be honest. So I wanted to come on here and tell you about it so that if you want to try this tool, which I highly recommend that you do, I want to share with you a way that you can get 50% off for 12 months because these guys are amazing. Their customer support is amazing. And if the word software is already scaring you because you're not tech savvy and you don't know anything about websites or how to do these sorts of things, I want you to take a deep breath and don't worry because it's the easiest thing in the world to use. And like I said, their customer service is incredible. With just a couple clicks, you can have this thing up and running on your website in no time. So don't let the tech scare you away. It's really, really easy and it's so worth it. So if you want to try this out in your business, all you have to do is go to bodygraphchart.com. I'll put the link in the show notes and you can get 50% off for 12 months. I know, really generous of them. 50% off for 12 months if you use the code Human Design Podcast, all lowercase, all together, Human Design Podcast. You guys, try it. Okay, I'll leave you alone for the transits now. And if you have any questions about this, just reach out and ask us.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Well, it's Transits Day, which I'm so freaking excited about. I'm really, really excited, Jenny, to get into looking back on the month. I mean, yes, we're still in the month, but I've had some really big stuff this month. So I just I'm really excited to hear your reflection on September and some of those keynotes so that I can respond and go, oh my God, that feels so true. So welcome, Jenni. It's so exciting to have you here as we do each month.
I'm just like a comfy sofa in the corner now at this point on this podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hi. Yeah. I mean, September. At least we feel like we've had a month. I feel like the comparison when we compare August to September and how fast forwarded August felt like, September to me feels like, okay, that's how time usually works. That's what a month feels like. We were just saying just off before we started recording that I feel that I've had one of those months where I'm not doing active shadow work or personal growth work, not deliberately triggering myself, but have been just naturally triggered by the process of life and the growth edge that I've been resting at has been, as all growth edges are, uncomfortable, difficult, a little bit overwhelming sometimes. But I trust this process of life so completely now. I think once you get to that place where you've done a lot of active shadow work and then you can sort of, like slide down the other side of the mountain and just go into the passive shadow work where now life is just doing the work for you and your only job is to show up and be with the whatever it is that's coming up. So I feel like September's been kind of like that for me, just keeps pushing me back to myself. That's what I feel happens when I get triggered. I notice how much of my self-worth or feeling of comfort within myself is still outsourced, and then how much I can keep bringing it back to myself and check in with myself and be like, and just be my own best friend, in that process. So I feel for me that it was partly what September was doing for me. It seems like a reassessment. I mean, all the outer planets in retrograde is also one of those things where we get these really strong retrospectives or reimaginings or course corrections almost, or just checking in, like, are we still going in this direction? Is this no longer? Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff for me. It feels like September was doing it. I've got some other things to mention that I noticed in the collective, but I'm just interested to see how you respond to that frequency.
Well, September's been really epic, but it definitely does feel like a reviewing. It feels like an up-leveling. As we record this, I am a week off the Mexico retreat, which I can't even put into words. Like, it was so transformative. It was so powerful. The synchronicities, the serendipity, there is no denying how guided each and every one of us were and how completely connected we were. And so much of that was revisiting who all of us were fundamentally, not just the attendees, if you like. That included myself, Taylor, and Jazz, who's our chef, also one of my dear friends and personal trainer, actually. Just watching that unfold was so massive. And I think it's interesting because I had this great opportunity to go to Boulder, Colorado, which, by the way, is freaking beautiful. It's like Byron, but in the mountains, like it's got a very similar feel. And I was interviewed on Open Minds for Gaia TV, which was so great. And my little line 3 was like, and I had no expectations. I'm very done so many podcast interviews now. I was nervous, but it wasn't, anything, out of the ordinary. And I got to the other side of it and I was like, that didn't feel the way I thought it was going to feel. And I kind of felt like, I don't want to say let myself down, but there was, a part of that. And then I'm just reminded, it's the first of many. It's that line 3, this is how life rolls for me. So, reviewing and reflecting and going over, that feels really true because, of course,
one of my rules is that you do not give yourself hard feedback within 24 hours of whatever it is that you do. You just let it be, whether you're emotional or not emotional. This is a brain thing as much as an authority thing. And by the next day, I was like, that's a great jumping off point. Yep, that's a great jumping off point. So I definitely feel like September's been amazing. And I mean, as we record this, I'm actually staying with Elizabeth Ralph, who's one of my dearest friends, walk Camino with her. And if you don't know her, she's the spiritual investor. So please go and look her up because she will change your life like she did mine. But yeah, it's been a month. You know, there's some, other stuff going on. And although it does feel like constantly reviewing, constantly going over, it feels like it's powerful and it feels like it's up leveling and it feels like what will come from it will be amazing. However, September has been a lot of heavy lifting for me, a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about your design the other day, about how interesting it must be. I was looking at the shift in the cross and the shift particularly in the homogenizing channel in the background frequency, and how interesting it must be for you to embody both of those channels. You've got the 3740 from the cross of planning and the 2034 from the incoming sleeping phoenix, and this incredible kind of embodiment of creating a community and that energy to do that tribal work through tribal loyalty and this background frequency that's kind of outgoing. And then also at the same time, you've got this fiercely independent self-empowerment that says, I answer to no one but myself, which is incoming. Wondering if you can almost feel internally the shift from one to the other. Kind of curious.
I love this question because I've actually reflected on this endlessly. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think, it's an accident that I'm designed the way I am. I don't think it's an accident that I'm a cross of planning. I don't think it's an accident that my son is a sleeping phoenix. I feel all my energy. It's like I'm standing on the tube in London and I have 1 foot on the station and 1 foot on the train. That's how my entire life feels. Like I'm just standing between the two. I am the bridge. So that's definitely how my energy feels. And you're absolutely right. You nailed it. Like I am so community driven. Like that 4037 is so fundamentally a part of who I am. However, one of the gifts that it gives me is I can see why it's not working anymore. I can see even in the parts of me that still feel aligned, why it doesn't work for everybody else. That like I can see those things. And I'm so driven by my 3420. Oh my God, that individual. Like we did this exercise on the retreat. Someone else was running a class and she said, draw a circle. And after the thing, then we're going to come in and we're going to draw in the circle. And I'm drawing whatever I'm drawing in the circle. And I think I've been there for about 30 seconds and all of a sudden I'm drawing outside the circle. And then, 3 minutes later, she's like, now you have permission to draw outside the circle. And I'm like, I already done it, babe. Like I'm way ahead of you here. So yeah, I really, it's a paradox, like I always say, that's how I feel as a human. No wonder I'm a Piscean with the two fish swimming in opposite directions. That's how I feel. And before human design, I was like, I've got to get these fish swimming in the right direction. Whereas now I'm like, oh, wow, no, I am swimming in two different directions and I can be doing that and be balanced and be happy and be all of those things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, that's exactly it, because it can really feel like two opposing energies, and they are opposing energies, but it's not like people are not going to be born on the cross of planning anymore after 2027. Of course they are. They're still going to come in. We still need them. It's just that the background frequency will be less supportive of that and be more supportive of the individual journeys that will be going on and the self-empowerment that will be going on, and that sense of I don't answer to anyone but myself. And that's what I can really feel coming in. For me anyway, I'm feeling just more and more alignment with that I answer to myself. It's me that I have to go to bed with at night. I'm the one that I have a relationship with. And if I've sacrificed myself, my principles, my values, my sense of self-love for anything else, I'm losing something. I'm really losing myself. So, yeah.
So beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. And, I actually also feel like, given that the 34 is in my personality north node, this is what I'm here to teach. I'm here to teach people to step into their power. And I got to say it again, because I said this thing to Elizabeth the other day, and I'm like, oh, that's good. And that is that people will look at me and they instantly think or instantly say to me, God, you're confident. I want your confidence. And as much as, yes, I am a confident person now, it's not the confidence. It's that I know who I am. My confidence is just, it's authenticity. I know who I am. And I think that is self-empowerment. And that is absolutely what we need right now and what we're moving towards. Because like you said, like when we are accountable to ourselves, to our heart, to our soul, to our higher expression, then we just become, the greatest potential that sits within us. And that's where we're moving. So it feels exciting, messy and exciting.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed this month, which I found really interesting, I'm just going to bring in some of what's been hitting the news media, certainly in the UK. I don't know if it's hitting the news media around the country, around the world as much, but the allegations against Russell Brand. And when something like that kind of comes out of the blue, there's suddenly this massive spotlight on something. My instinct is to look at the transits and be like, what's causing this? So when something like that hit the news, I was like, where's the sun? Gate 6. And there's a really interesting correlation, like learning, if you're trying to learn human design and learn the lines, and you can do this, like look at these short-term sort of media spotlights and then look at the progression of them using the sun, where the sun is as an example. So I did this with this Russell Brand situation. I'm not going to make a personal judgment on it because who knows, but from a human design perspective, we have the sun in gate 6, which is the gate of conflict and friction in the context of intimate sexual relationships. And gate 6 is often called the gatekeeper to intimacy. And so when I look at the dates, Russell makes his personal announcement on his channel the day before the sun moves into gate 6, but the moon is in gate 6. So he's almost preempting the light of the sun, if you will, with his announcement. September 16th, we get the line 1 of gate 6. So we've got the foundations of the investigation, the essence or the foundation of the thing. So the results of the initial investigation are published on the gate 6 line 1 day. So we've got there's the foundation. This is the essence of what's going on. Here's the results of the investigations. And then as you follow it along day by day, next day it's line 2 day on the 17th. What's line 2 about? Projections, calling out. And so there were calls put out by media outlets, Channel 4 being one of them, for further information. So they're putting out a call to say, has anyone else got any further information on this? Any other allegations? So there's this line 2 process. You get to line 3, where you get bonds made and broken on the line 3 day. This was the day that several major publishers and talent agencies broke off their relationships with him. They're breaking the bonds. We get to line 4, which is associated with networks and opportunities and information spread. And there you get loads of streaming services, including the YouTube and the BBC, taking down his content and taking away his advertising rights. So the network being affected. And then the line 5 day, we're into the heretic part. And Russell Brand is one of the most public heretics I can think of. So we start to get these this awareness of the other heresies associated with him, like the way he challenges the status quo, the drug companies, and people start to say, oh, he's being pilloried because of his universal heresy. So you get a real focus on his heresy on the 5th line day. By the 6th line, which is the 21st of September, we're then getting bigger picture, or the how this affects more than just this one little event, but actually the global picture. And this is when Rumble made its announcement about the government attempted interventions to try and silence them. And they make this much broader picture about, is it okay that government are trying to shut down private media companies? So there's a broader perspective being talked about there. So I just think, one of the best tools we have for learning human design is to follow these quite short-term media events and see if we can see the progression of the line. So I found that really an interesting thing to watch. And just to say that Mercury will go back into gate 6 for 3 days at the beginning of October. So we may see sort of a return to this becoming a bit more front page news around that time.
Wow, I just love that. I think it's such a great idea. Like, just to be able to almost like bring a metaphor, like it's not a metaphor, it's a real life thing, but just to give that deeper understanding of how things show up. But yeah, far out, like craziness. This is all craziness, the whole Russell Brand thing.
I mean, it's not I'm so like collective in my view. I find it really hard to like get too involved in the nitty gritty, but I'm so interested in like, is this just the program? Are we all just puppets of the planets? Really interesting.
Yeah.
But as a collective, I mean, what's that inviting us to look at? You know, if the sun is shining a light on an event for us all to learn from, what is the nature of intimacy? Who gets to be the gatekeeper of that? What is consent? Who decides when to allow intimate access to another? You know, that all of these themes around Gate 6 are being brought into question. And this is, you know, 59.6 is a WAR channel. For those who aren't familiar with that term, WAR is like the bigger groups of humanity. It's not just individuals. It's not just little groups. It's a bigger group. And so 59.6 is a big conditioner. It's a deep conditioning agent for humanity. And it creates our emotional wave resonance when you look at the profiles. The keynotes for that coming from the Gate 6. So it is affecting us all, that energy. It's affecting all of our... we're all, you know, we see something like that and then we make it personal, right? We're like, it reminds us of our own experiences or people we know's experiences. We empathize deeply because Gate 6 is our emotional resonance, our emotional wave resonance. So there's a lot in that, you know, when something comes to public attention like that, there's a lot of work for us all to do, especially when it's in a war gate.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, and even more interesting to see how you map it back to human design. That I'm really looking forward to.
I will keep my eye on the story as it unfolds.
Yeah, and just let us know what gate and what line we're in.
Well, we are currently, as you and I are recording this, Emma, we're in Gate 46, and this is a really it's a nice bridge between where we've been and where we're heading. We're about to talk about October. So we're heading into the second half of the quarter of duality, purpose fulfilled through bondings and relationships. So you can kind of see again how that's part of the theme in the media. But Gate 46 is one of the love gates, and it's love of being embodied. And so a nice personal example of how this is playing out for me, also possibly because it creates a channel with my hanging 29. So this week, while the sun has been in Gate 46, the love of the body, I have seen the dentist, the optician, the osteopath, the gynecologist, and the homeopath.
So, I love it.
Not planned, but I just suddenly I'm like, hang on a minute, why have I spent most of the last few days basically taking care of my body, like having a full MOT? I'm like, look in my eyes, look at my mouth, look everywhere, check, am I okay? Yeah. So we can also start to see, again, when you get these little clusters of coincidences, synchronicities, you can be like, is there a correlation there?
Do you know, I love that because I happen to know that Taylor is at the dentist as we speak right now.
And my best friend Tashi, I called her that night after I'd been to the osteopath. She had also been to the osteopath that day and had almost exactly the same treatment done that I'd had.
Oh, like, my God, that is
when they massage inside your face to release your neck, all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those weeks. Oh
my God,
body
that is hilarious. I know for me, like the body thing is all about recovery. I'm definitely in recovery mode. Like, yeah, love it. So what's next?
October's next, my love. That's where we're headed. Ready? Everybody
Deep
ready?
breath. Yeah.
Because what comes after Gate 46? So reminder for those who have not yet got a wheel document, you can go to my website, have a look on the podcast page and get a Wheel of the Year document. There's 2 of them there. That'll help you visualize what I'm about to talk about. So we are about to go into the spleen process. So there's a couple of very clear processes around the wheel. We have the solar plexus process that's over the other side of the wheel. In, goodness, when does that happen? February? Yeah, February, March, we get into the solar plexus process. And then we've just come out of the throat process, which is in quarter 2. And then when we're in quarter 3, we have the spleen process, and by which I mean the sun goes through all of the gates of the spleen consecutively.
Well, I'm really hoping that I've done a lot of my work, because I would love to not like play in those shadows of those spleen gates. I would love to just be like in this like well-being and feeling really intuitively guided. That's the intention I'm putting out there for October. Thank you. Don't shake your head at me, Jenny. Don't shake your head at me.
I'm shaking my head in agreement, Emma. May it be so.
Yeah.
So you'll see if you look at the wheel documents, there's a row of 7 yellow gates in the upper right-hand side of the wheel on the last 6 weeks of Quarter of Duality. Now, it's not just the sun that will be transiting these gates. All of the personal planets, which is Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, the Earth, and the Moon, are all in this area at the moment. I'll give you the dates. I know some of you are note takers and you like to make notes of the dates of what planets where when. So Mars is already there. Mars is going through the gates of the spleen from 18 to 44. It started on the 3rd of September. It will finish on the 31st of October. That's a 58-day transit. So 2 months for Mars in the spleen gates. The Sun, which is our main kind of track when we're tracking the mandala, is the Sun will be there from the 27th of September to 5th of November, 40 days. Mercury is now direct out of its retrograde, and that will transit the spleen gates between the 7th and the 30th of October. That's a 24-day transit. Moon, just 4 days between the 13th and the 16th of October. And then Venus is a bit behind everyone because she's just come out of retrograde. She will transit between the 12th of November and the 15th of December, 33-day transit. So basically everyone's in there.
Great. Okay.
What might this be highlighting for us then at a personal level, seeing as all of the personal planets are in there? The spleen has a couple of associations most strongly. Of course, it's associated with survival fears and well-being fears, and we'll come on to that later. But it's also associated with the awareness of our immune system and an awareness of our health. What is good for us, what is not good for us, and this can be specific or overall well-being. It can manifest as fear, which is alerting us to things that may or not be safe or healthy for us in the moment. And then, of course, we then get the opportunity to work through those fears that are conditioned and are not actually in this moment part of our survival or well-being. So that's the general theme. It's interesting. I've been doing a bit of digging. I heard Martin Grassinger give a talk at the High Desert Human Design Conference. He's always interesting to listen to, Martin Grassinger. He was one of Ra's original collaborators and students, and he was already in homeopathy and working with the body very deeply, and he has continued that work for the past 30 years. So he's one of the people in human design that has really done a lot of work on these biological correlations in the body with the human design teachings. And he specifically says about the spleen that it's not the spleen is not the immune system, because the spleen is not a motor and therefore it couldn't generate the energy, but it's the awareness of the immune system. It's the awareness of our health. So he makes that distinction quite clearly. And another thing he was talking about, which was, really fascinating to me. I have no idea how he professes to know this, but he was talking about the order in which a developing fetus, so as the cells are starting to divide, the first gate that's created, in fact, the first 2 gates that are created are spleen gates, according to Martin Grassinger. The 44 is first, followed by the 32, which I thought was fascinating. When you actually look at those gates and what they're associated with, inheritance, so it's instinct, right? It's associated with the sense of smell, it's associated with a deep instinct. And my observation and understanding of it, which happy for you to jump in on this, is that it's the genetically inherited fears from our lineage, like biological fear programming for survival, for our deepest instincts. So anything that threatened our ancestors' survival or killed them, we get information about that to aid our survival as part of our makeup. And according to Martin Grassinger, it's the first thing that's developed. The very first thing we develop is 44 and 32. So
what a challenge. Like straight away when I hear that, I'm like, the difference between the generations now is so big. You do know what I mean? Like the things that I would have been programmed to be fearful of, so many of them were just not even relevant, you know. But the gap between me and my kids is massive, you know, so far out that like a generation seems way too long to be updating those, right?
I completely agree with you. And you can see how a couple of 100 years ago, that would have been the most intelligent thing our body could have done.
100%.
Because those fears would be relevant. Those would be the same survival threats that every generation was going to face.
Yeah.
And here we are, still with all this unbelievable programming, and a lot of them not relevant anymore.
Yeah. Most of it not relevant.
So we really get to start to see through this reflection the task ahead of us if we want to transmute these fears, how we're going to get an opportunity possibly in the next 6 weeks as they come up.
Yeah, exactly. So buckle up and get to work.
Yeah, because we can then get some kind of understanding of what we're actually doing here. Like, this is about more than just us. This is about what are we programming into our children.
100%. Yep.
So, which is, I mean, if only every parent had the opportunity to do their work before they had kids, right? I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful? But yet, it's still, the energy transmutes whether the children are already here or not.
Yeah.
You know, we have this opportunity to transmute everything, and rapidly, it seems, at this time in history.
Exactly. And, you know, I think one of the paradoxes about being a parent is you can do all the work you want in the world, because the moment you have kids, it's like you start over, you know, like it's, you just do everything you've ever feared, just amplifies in front of you. So, yeah.
So the first thing to note when we're looking at the spleen fears is it's not anything that we're doing wrong, because it's something that's programmed from the beginning of our cell division, and therefore it's programmed into every cell of the body. So there's that. The gates that come after the 44 and the 32, the 54 actually then comes next, according to Martin. So the whole of that channel of ambition, the channel of transformation, the channel that is the drive, the root fuel drive to rise up and transform those past experiences of, say, poverty and ill health, which were most likely the common causes of death, and rise up to a level of tribal material security so that we're more likely to survive. And again, this is basically the earliest channel that develops, that says, be more financially and materially successful than your ancestors were, because then you're more likely to survive. And it's likely that most people listening to this are more successful materially than their ancestors were. So you can see that it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of interest, although we'll come back to the spleen, the next two gates that get developed, according to Martin, are the 19 and the 49. So the next fears that are programmed, fear of rejection by the tribe, it's an existential fear. It's a deeply imprinted part of this fear for belonging and tribal bonding, as deep as it gets.
Yeah. I always remember doing my training, like all fears come back to, excluding the fear of death, because that's obviously one of the others, but it's the fear of not belonging, the fear of not being loved, and the fear of not being enough. Like every fear comes back to one of those three.
Yeah. So here we are. As we're entering the splenic process, we can get some awareness of what might start to come up and get more awareness of. We can start to understand that even though this is universal to all humans, once we've seen and acknowledged these fears, we don't need to be driven by them at the unconscious level. Once we've brought them back into our conscious awareness, there's no need to be ashamed of them, as in, like, why am I so materially driven, or why am I so afraid of rejection? It's basic survival intelligence. That's all that you're being made aware of. So we can start to look at the process then that the sun will go through, and each of the planets will go through, in order. It's a really interesting game, I think, to play, to go through them in order and see what reaches for the next thing. So another thing, if you're learning lines in human design, is the sixth line of any gate is always reaching for the next one round the mandala. It's reaching over for the first line of the next gate round the mandala. This is true of the original I Ching. So like the 27 would always be reaching for the 28 once it gets to the sixth line. But in human design, we're using the order of the planetary activations round the mandala. So when we're looking at the spleen gates, which all come in a row, you will see that the sixth line of the first gate will then reach for the first line of the next gate. So what I've done, and this is a fun game for you human design geeks out there, pick any little chunk of the mandala, 4 or 5 gates in order, and then see if you can see the progression as the sixth line reaches for the first line of the next one. So I'm going to talk you through, if that's all right. It's a bit of a mission I've been on, but all of the spleen gates reaching for each other, just to kind of demonstrate how this might
Sounds exciting.
play out.
I'm in.
First gate that comes in is the 18. So we're looking at a foundation of what is called work on what has been spoiled, the gate of judgment or correction. So it's the ability to see the flaws or the potential for improvement. Basically what could be improved in the context of like the whole of humanity. It's a collective circuitry. And the first line of any gate is its foundation and its essence. So the line 1 is conservatism. In keynoting, the adherence to traditional patterns despite changing circumstances. So it's quite a conservative modification of our judgments. Fear of authority is associated with gate 18. So you're looking at this then in the context of authority, because it's the fear of our awareness to challenge authority. Now, who are the first authority figures in our lives? Our parents, caregivers. So when we're looking at 18.1 conservatism, it's this, again, what Emma and I are talking about, this historical continuity of like you always parent the way you were parented and your parents parented the way they were parented. And there would have been this continuity, this conservative continuity of how to be an authority in the world and who you allowed to have authority over you. Now, again, that is rapidly changing. So when we're looking at 18 in its essence at the first line, we can start to reflect on this conservatism about do we agree with the way that our parents demonstrated being an authority in our life or not? Did their pattern of authority need correcting in the way that you parented your children? So, you know, as Emma was saying, like suddenly you've got kids and you're assessing all of these things, like what is helpful that we inherited? What did they model that's still good, still relevant, still helpful that we really benefited from? And what needs to change? 18 goes through that whole process of assessing authority and assessing correction and assessing how we choose to correct, what we choose to correct. And when we get to the line 6, it's got the keynote of Buddhahood. So there is this real sense when you get to Buddhahood that we're not now looking to focus on what's been spoiled, because we're starting to see the inherent perfection in every moment. We've been through this process and we got to this almost transcendent perfection in the Buddhahood line. But then we're like, well, if I'm not constantly looking around me to see what could be better, where do I look next? And it looks actually across the stream to gate 48, which is the next one. So it starts to look across to the gate of the deep well, this potential wisdom. So it's not so much now about spotting, working on what's been spoiled. It's like, are there deeper learnings for the collective here? Is the more that we can learn from what I've been doing in the 18 that's actually could be then brought out into the world? So it's this kind of it moves from sort of more of a personal fuel into much more of a collective deep well of potential wisdom. 48 is the foundation of solutions. So when you're looking across, it's like it's gone from criticism to a potential solution is what it's starting to move into.
I love that because I have the 18 in line 6, both sides Pluto. So I'm like,
yeah,
that tracks massively.
So you're less concerned in looking for the problems and more concerned in looking at the solution.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And like authority is a massive theme for me, like really massive theme, because I'm like, it's broken and it's not like this needs fixing. It's like this needs reimagining. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it was interesting for me as well because I've got 48 in line 3 and line 6. I've also got it then looks to 57.1, which I have. I've also got 57.6. So I've got like a whole chain of them, like as they look at each other.
Wow.
So exactly what Emma's describing in her personal experience. 18.6 is not that interested in work on what's been spoiled anymore. It's much more interested in this deep solutions, what might actually work. So that's the foundation of 48, is this, whether it can be practical solutions, it can also be kind of trivial in the first line, but it's just this general sort of scoping out of, let's start looking at the wisdom of these experiences and how we can turn those into solutions. When you get to the 6th line of the 48th gate, the depth of talent that is, because this is part of the channel of talent that is being offered, is now like a continuous flow. Mastery has been reached, that this person is giving their wisdom and then keeps being nourished by their community and supported so that they can keep giving, so that there's a real sense that this process of depth, wisdom, mastery over solutions has really been reached. This person is then at the point where they're like, okay, well, this is all very good, but this was a lot of work. There's a lot of work in this process. Is there an easier way, or is there a better way? It looks next to the 57.1, the gate of intuitive insight. So they're now no longer in this process of this kind of collective, logical, step-by-step, over and over process. They're now looking at individual intuitive insight. It's almost like it, and I, like I say, I have the 48.6. I also have the 57.1. So there's always a part of me that's like, this is hard work. I actually just want to trust my instinct, trust my intuition, and let the solution just present itself out of literally nowhere. I just want to trust my inner knowing. And so that's where the 48 moves into the 57. Is there the potential that my individual intuitive clarity is going to penetrate to the heart of this situation a little bit easier than just constantly going over and over and over something until we've figured out how to do it well?
I love that.
57.6, I also have this line. We've fully explored all the potential possibilities of intuitive clarity, and we've realized that it doesn't actually provide all the solutions all of the time. There's some things that intuition alone can't deal with, and we're like accepting of that, like, yeah, I intuitively know that this isn't going to work, but actually there's nothing I can do about it. So then it looks to the 32. So we're going to talk about 32 in quite a lot of depth, because the South Node is in there. There's a whole eclipse thing happening in there in October. But the 32, when we realize that intuition isn't going to cut it all by itself, what do we turn to? Our instincts and our connection to the whole of life. I've already mentioned how this is one of the earliest programs that we all share, and it connects us all. It's tribal awareness. It's this deep instinctive tribal awareness, and it's about not just our own survival, but the survival of the whole biosphere. It's because it's connected to all things. So we're looking then not just at our exploring the possibilities of our own intuition, but then into our instincts to connect us to the whole. By the time we reach the 6th line of gate 32, which is keynoted, the only thing that continues is change, we have this understanding that we can keep things alive for a certain amount of time. We can put in our efforts, we can keep them going. It's called continuity or duration. Like, what is the duration of the lifespan of this thing? But by line 6, we realize we actually do have to face the nature of impermanence. We have to realize that all biological material, everything in the material world changes and eventually ends. So we come to this place in the 32.6 where we're like, I can't keep this up forever. It is I'm going to have to let it go. It's going to have to change eventually. And then where do we look? Gate 50, line 1. Even though life is this continuous process of change, what could endure from generation to generation is the values that we uphold as a collective, as a tribe. So yes, all the physical forms will decay and die, but we can keep the values going. So let's do that. So Gate 50 explores all of these values that we hand on for historical continuity that are about preservation and about enduring. It says there are certain historical laws that we can rely on. So in the process of Gate 50, we might find ourselves researching ancient indigenous tribal laws that were focused on the preservation of life and harmonious balance, which is what this channel's all about. By the time we get to the line 6 of Gate 50, though, we're like, okay, we've got strong leadership and the values of humanity. But what happens when those tribal values that we're all kind of adhering to are actually negatively affecting our relationships, our personal relationships one-on-one? You could see this. I was thinking about how this might show up. And so you could have this kind of archetype of the grandparent who's trying to uphold the way it's always been done, while the grandchildren are rebelling against this old order, and that would negatively affect their relationship. So even though there's this sense of let's continue these values, but it's affecting negatively the relationships, which is what the 50.6 is realizing. It reaches for 28.1, the gate of the game player. And this is the individual intuition to know which battles to fight and which battles not to fight. It's pick your battles time. So in the first line, it's the preparation, the attention to detail about how to address these issues. So the grandchild in our example might start researching their arguments to undermine their grandparents' insistence on historical values. So it moves out of the tribal and back into the individual, so that we can get some awareness of how to individually mutate what has been collectively understood. By the time we get to line 6 in the gate 28, we've reached the maximum potential. The keynote of this gate is Blaze of Glory, which says, I'm going out, like I'm going to win no matter what it costs me. We are going to do this thing. We're going to renew, regenerate, mutate, change this thing no matter what sacrifice I have to make. So it's like, I'm sorry, tribal values, but I'm an individual. I'm playing my own game and I'm going to have to do this. Final one, after the Blaze of Glory, we get to 44, gate 44, alertness, and instinctive memory. And as you can remember, that was the first gate to develop. So it's like we go full circle just to go by going through the spleen. We go all the way out and then back to the beginning. We remember what was needed for survival from our ancestral past. But the most important thing to know about this is the keynote is success of any interaction is based on an absence of preconditions. So we've been through this whole journey through our ways of surviving and thriving at a collective level, an individual level, a tribal level. And we're back at the beginning, which is the end of the spleen gates, that says in order to have successful interactions with others, we have to enter them with an absence of preconditions. We have to be able to heal our past hurts, get over our old survival fears that are no longer actually serving our ability to come to meet the others, because that's what this gate is keynoted, coming to meet approach. So we meet people as they are in this moment and this life that we're having right now together. We don't necessarily need to bring all of our old baggage to colour the interaction that we're about to have with this person. So if we, and it's again, this is tribal still circuitry, if we're going to have successful interactions moving forward, in the present and therefore moving forward, we're going to have dealt with all that stuff in the spleen.
Oh my God, I love that. I love it. It's so powerful. And I love the story, like just hearing the story of how it all unfolds and how it goes from one to the next and the next. And yeah, on so many levels just resonates, far out.
Yeah, I mean, I really encourage you all to play that game for yourself. Just pick a little bit of the wheel and do it. Because, you might even pick the same bit and tell your own story, a different story. I just want to give props to Jonah Dempsey, who taught me this game, I was part of a course of his and he encouraged us all to do this, to take a little bit of the wheel and play with it like that. I think I haven't done it all yet, but I will probably eventually work my way all the way around the mandala, because I find, my circuitry is logical, collective, and yet I feel like I learn the most from abstract storytelling and narrative. Obviously that's where I go to school. Most of my abstract circuitry is open. And so it's not something that comes naturally to me, but it's definitely where I learn the most. I think because it's so different from my natural, what I naturally express, that whenever anyone tells a really good story about something, it really sticks with me and it really helps me to learn it. So, this game of jumping from the 1 to the 6 to the 1 to the 6 all the way around, a little bit of the wheel will help you learn about it.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I'm definitely going to like listen to this and just take notes. I just love it.
I think one of the things, when we first learning human design, there's this tendency to isolate every bit and separate each bit. And yet when you've been doing this long enough, you start to get back to being able to put it all back together and see it in relationship. So this is one way to see the gates in relationship in the wheel, to see them, how they interact with one another. Of course, there's interactions, if you're looking at one gate, you can always look at the other end of the channel to see what it's interacting with, or you can look at its programming partner across the wheel to see what it's interacting with. Or, there's many different ways to slice this cake. But this is one way, is to look at the dynamic dance of life that is always in movement, because none of these energies are stuck. They're in this permanent dynamic movement and evolution.
Yeah. And dance with each other. I love that. I think that's one of the really important points about human design, is that, yes, when we learn it, when we start this experiment, we break it down into pieces, but the power is how it all comes back together. So, I love that.
I had a dream rave analysis this month, and the analyst that was doing it was jumping back and forth between my waking chart, my dream rave chart, all of my major transits, so my Saturn return, my Uranus, my Chiron, and something else I can't remember. And she was just back and forth. Like, her brain's ability to synthesize my entire holographic thing was just mind-blowing.
Wow.
The mandala. She was doing the mandala with the godheads. I mean, just the whole thing. It was extraordinary to see, and like really inspirational. You can sort of see where you could get to with enough decades of study.
Yeah. Wow. This MG is like, wow, that's a lot of details. That's a lot of depth.
You've got gate 9. You can handle it.
Yeah, this is true.
All right. So fun times with the spleen coming up. But one of those gates I said I was going to pull out is the gate 32, and that's because the nodes, the south node is in gate 32. So since late August, north node's been in gate 42, south in 32. And this gate, the 32, the gate of continuity and duration, that connects to the 54 in the root, which is the gate of ambition. So when we're talking about the fears for our survival, and this spleen, which is the center of our awareness of what is going to keep us going, I went then to the gene keys to get a bit more depth, because I really like the way that Richard Rudd has studied the human design system very deeply, and then has transmuted it into this extraordinary body of work in the gene keys. So if we take this 32, which is associated fear of failure, and then we dig into that with Richard's help to understand what we're afraid of, actually. What failure is it that we're afraid of? So at the surface, it's going to look like money, afraid that we don't have enough money to take care of ourselves and our family. And that sense of fearing to fail in terms of status and ambition and all that's associated with that. That's sitting on the surface. But if you look deeper, the root is the fear of not being able to reproduce, as in the collective fear of the species in relation to survival is, what's the ultimate failure? That humans go extinct. That's the ultimate failure. How might we go extinct? Well, we wouldn't be able to reproduce for whatever reason, and therefore we would die out. So there is an extraordinarily deep collective fear that sits underneath this, what shows itself at the surface, which are these fears for our material survival. And I think that deep fear, I'm certainly seeing it expressed more in casual conversation. I think, as people start to talk about climate catastrophe, AI, like all these things, what they seem to then end up at is the fear of the extinction of the human species. So 32 is getting quite a lot of attention at the moment. Richard goes on to talk about how our survival, either as individuals or in a family group, is actually rooted in our connections and with the things that support us and provide for us. There's this idea that we kind of seem to be in the zeitgeist of survival based on isolation, individualism, and competition. is obviously false. Like, your flourishing is dependent. The flourishing of the one is dependent on the flourishing of the whole. We can't flourish if everything else isn't flourishing.
Yeah.
So this is what the South Node in 32 is inviting us to lean into. The gift in this gate is preservation, and it's an instinctive awareness for what is actually serving the survival of the human species and the whole biosphere, because we can't separate them. And it's flourishing, this diverse Earth biosphere. What serves that and what doesn't serve that? So this past month, and then going on into the next few months, the South Node is giving us this opportunity to look at what is actually the deep, deep thing that actually supports us and nourishes us, and what would that look like at an individual level, at a small tribal level, and then what necessarily that will transfer out into collective consciousness. So it's in terms of where we can work at it with the surface, if we understand that what's underneath it, but we're like, yeah, but we can still really only work at the surface level. It might look like a relaxed attitude towards money and other survival essentials. It might be this understanding of the interconnectedness, the interweaving of all. Money is part of the energy system, and the fact that it flows, and the more generous you are, the more it comes back to you. And, this awareness that life will provide in the exact right way that we need, and that whatever's required will come to us. And so if we want to work at the deep level, we can start at the surface and sort of be like, okay, what is my attitude like to money, to survival, to having, to ambition, to status, like all of that stuff. And could we see that it's transitory? And the transitoriness of power and influence is one of the keynotes in the spleen. It's like, can we see that it comes and goes?
Oh my goodness. I'm just reflecting on some stuff that's going on in my world, and I'm like, wow, that's very relevant.
Thank you, 32.
Yeah, thank you, 32.
As I mentioned when I was talking through, from line 1 to 6 just before, it's like, it's also an awareness of what is actually done with, from the 1 to the 6, the continuity, the duration, what can I keep going, what needs to stay, actually, hang on, does that need to stay? Is that ready to go? So it's tribal, so it's relational. Which people, which relationships have something to offer me at this time of my life, and which do not? They associate this gate as the HR manager, the person who can recognize the particular talents or abilities or gifts of the person and assign the tasks. So there's this understanding that, yeah, we all have something valuable to offer the whole. Every single one of us has something. The instinct that we need to develop is to be able to recognize when, where, who, how, is at any particular time is required, because the spleen is all about the now. So there may be historical value to that person that's no longer, or there may be a new person coming in, and we're instinctively assessing this value that they could potentially bring to our life. So there's a whole thing about this assessment of everything's going to change eventually. Is this the right time for this to change now?
Wow. And I feel like that's such a big theme for everyone at the moment. There's just so much going on. And for me, like, I'm in a 9-year, so it's like I feel like the whole being a 9-year is just like the 32 for the whole year. Like, okay, what's staying, what's going?
Yeah, what's staying, what's going. Let's mention the Siddhi, because it's always nice to sort of lean into the high frequency of the gate. And the Siddhi is veneration. So veneration for all life, veneration for the fractal line or the lineage that supports you, that's on you, veneration for the lives that have gone before and endured tremendous hardships to put us where we are now. Also veneration for our own part in that process, understanding that we are going through trials and tribulations so that others will benefit in the future. This continuous lineage that we can venerate, we can say thank you and be grateful for. We had an equinox circle with my little crew yesterday, and we did a healing meditation for all the ancestors who've survived and thrived and provided us with this chance at life. And it's just really moving to connect to that energy and, ask for their wisdom when I asked my ancestors for their wisdom in this circle, the message I got was, you should be profoundly more grateful on a moment-to-moment basis than you actually are, because you are living our dream. Your ease, your level of abundance is so extraordinary. Can you please remember what we went through? So yeah, there's a lot of attitudinal shifts, I think, that can really help with this energy. It can feel very material because it's tribal, but my teacher's always telling me, or us as a group, you do not need to be healed. It is your attitude that needs to be healed. And he's right. I can shift my attitude and smile and be thankful and say yes. Or who said, and I can't remember, I heard this recently, like, instead of saying, you say good, like whatever's happening, you just say good that this is happening. Probably someone like Byron Katie. But yeah, that shift in my attitude can also bring me to a sense of feeling healed just in the moment.
Yeah, 100%.
So to summarize, South Node in 32 is an instinct for what needs to continue to ensure our flourishing and what can be let go tribally, individually, collectively, whatever that is. And maybe it is just an attitude that we need to let go.
I love that. Feels very relevant.
Good. Well, that's nice to know that there's resonance with the transit.
Thanks, universe. Thanks, transits. Thanks, Jenny.
Also to mention, there is a solar eclipse in gate 32 in October. So on the 14th of October, that will be, so the solar eclipse is where the moon gets between the earth and the sun and covers the sun, and it can leave like a ring of fire, like a corona on the outside of it. If you're in the US, there is a path of totality from Oregon to Texas, so you might want to look that up if you want to go and watch the solar eclipse. Cool. Through Central America as well. So this lineup of the solar eclipse is the sun, the moon, and the nodes. So the nodes have to be in alignment too, for the sun and the moon and everything to get on the same trajectory. So it's just a real strengthening of the focus on that energy. And so the peak of this focus on gate 32 is on the 14th of October.
Wow, that feels very powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've mentioned it on here before, I think, but I was born on a solar eclipse. So my personality sun, personality moon, and personality north node all lined up in the same gate. So it brings a real intensity in so any babies that are born on the 14th of October get this real intensity of 32, and I've got this real intensity of 57, which is just before it.
Wow.
And finally, I also wanted to check in on the outer planets, because I feel like I haven't done much talking about them recently because they haven't done much. There's been a lot of retrograde. They haven't moved very far. But I want to go way out to the far side, far into the solar system, and check in with Pluto and Neptune. Pluto's in gate 60, where it's been for a very long time, and this is acceptance of limitations. So I've got a story to illustrate this point, because, as I said, I'm getting really leaning into my potential for narrative to embody something and illustrate something. So in the I Ching translation by Hilary Barrett, which is the one I use, and I think it's the one you use as well, she uses this example of a lake with a river, or maybe two, like feeding it at the top end. So the rivers come into the lake, they fill it with water, and then at the other end there's a stream coming out of it further down. The question with 60 is, how many exit streams could you dig? So you're like, okay, there's a lake with loads of water in it and my crops need watering, whatever. I'm going to dig an extra stream at the other end to water my crops. The question would be, how many exit streams could you dig before there isn't enough water to flow into them all? There is a certain point where that would become the case. There would be not enough water coming into the lake to continuously feed multiple exit streams. So it's saying that with gate 60, there are certain natural laws that govern the way the world works. If you eventually dig too many exit streams, there's not going to be enough water coming in or enough in the lake to supply them all. So there are certain limits to this planet and its resources, and managing them sustainably is part of the role of gate 60. It's part of the incarnation cross of laws. It feels responsible, because gate 50 is also involved in the cross of laws, for managing those limits. And this is another example of where when you start to learn more about human design, you start to put all the pieces together. Okay, 60 doesn't operate on its own. It operates in conjunction with other energies. So there's a responsibility for managing the limits of the planet. It's reminding people that you can't dilute something exponentially or it'll lose its essence. I also read a book this month called Guardians of the Trees by Dr. Kinnary Webb, which speaks exactly to this point. She was in Borneo leading a team of people trying to protect the rainforest, trying to stop the ancient trees from being logged. These trees that are thousands of years old cannot be replaced, and the logging that happens in Borneo. And she did this extraordinary piece of work on working out why the local people were logging these ancient trees out of the forest. And it all came down to healthcare. When their family members got sick, the only way they could pay to get to the hospital and for the treatment was to cut down ancient trees. So she took healthcare into the forest so that they had access to free healthcare, or at least an exchange. They could work for the exchange, they could pay for it because they're proud people, right? They don't want to get everything for free, without logging the forest. So she went into the forest with this process of what she called radical listening. Whereas most NGOs go in with a solution, she went in with a curiosity and a constant re-questioning, interviewing the local people to find out the problem and the solution. She was like, these people know the solution, they just haven't been listened to. So it's a brilliant book if you want to read Guardians of the Trees by Kinnary Webb. But she's talking about exactly this. Yeah. You can take a few trees out of the rainforest here and there and it will recover. There will come a point where you've gone past the natural limitation for regeneration and you've created a wasteland. And in many cases, it's sooner than you think. You know, these people who've lived in this ancient forest their whole life, and they're like, you can cut down trees, it's fine, it'll grow back. And she's like, not up to a point, yeah, but not at the rate you're taking it out. So it's a big theme for all of us right now. Pluto is sitting in gate 60, and it's asking us to notice. I mean, we can't help it because it's Pluto, and it's like, this is true, guys. These are the limitations, according to natural law, that will ensure the sustainability of this as a resource for the future. And the question for us is, can we accept these limitations or not? Like, there's no avoid, as Peter Schäuble always says, there's no avoiding Pluto. You can't avoid it. So it's a dark truth in our case because we are having to look at the reality of it. Like, you can't take out a forest; it will be replaced with grassland and non-native grassland, and it will burn. You know, and that is an accept. We have to accept that that's the limitation of not having a forest where there used to be a forest, for example. Yeah. So when we're checking in with Pluto, what's Pluto doing? Continuing to remind us that there are limits to the natural law, and if we exceed them, there are consequences to that. So Pluto is retrograde. It will go direct in October on the 11th in gate 60. Neptune, meanwhile, still in 36. In human design, we call this the gate of crisis or the darkening of the light. When we look at Hilary Barrett's I Ching, the name it's given is called brightness hidden. Darkening of the light, brightness hidden. And I was like, that is an interesting...
That's a really nice perspective shift, isn't it?
Brightness hidden. And the way she talks about it, I say she, I'm assuming Hilary Barrett. Hilary's also a male name. So it could be whoever Hilary is, male or female.
I'm pretty sure it's a she.
Yeah. Good. Sorry, that just occurred to me. May not be female Hilary. She talks about this, referring to brightness hidden, referring to a light inside of ourselves that is not currently visible by the collective. So there might be a certain inner brightness that it is not safe or appropriate or the right time to share yet. We might even have to hide that brightness for a while until the crisis has passed and we can freely shine it. So a quote from her entry on this hexagram: "There is no need to let the full glare of your insights shine forth all the time, or force your understanding on those who might not want it." Also, this is Neptune. So Neptune is doubly hiding it because it's Neptune. And that implies a veil or something that's really hard to see. Neptune is deep water, or it's also the far edge of the solar system. So last night I watched the film Ad Astra with Brad Pitt as an astronaut who goes to Neptune. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not seen it.
I really got the sense of what it would be like to be a human at Neptune and how far away that is.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. It makes me feel a bit sick even trying to contemplate
it really comes across how far away Neptune is.
And it's like that whole, like, not just like, oh my God, I'm so far away, but just that deep emptiness of no one. Like going back to that fear of not belonging, but like, that's what comes up in me.
Yeah, Ad Astra exactly that's the point of the film, is to talk about this. Like, we're running away from Earth, but like, can you handle it when you get there?
Yeah, far out.
So all of that to say that Neptune, when you're at Neptune, looking back at the sun, the light of the sun is so dim. It's so far away. You're at the edge of the solar system. And so we've got this whole theme. We probably won't be able to see the light until Neptune moves out of gate 36. Initially, it moves out in April 24 next year, but then it goes back in a retrograde. So it finally moves out in February 2025. So I think we have this wonderful opportunity during the next year to cultivate our inner light in this darkness that we hold in our hearts, and we wait for the right time to shine it. So now is the time, when so many systems are in crisis, that we can cultivate our inner light. And one of the questions that Hilary Barrett asks in this entry is, when no one is looking, who are you? It's a cool question, huh? Who are you?
I love that question. It's absolutely one of my favorite questions. I can't remember what book it was, and it was worded differently. But I love it. I love it, because that's true authenticity. True authenticity is who you are when no one's paying attention.
So that's where I think we've got, to see us through the long dark winter of Neptune in 36, is this cultivation of our inner light, and asking yourself the question. I'm going to leave this is where we're going to end, and leave us all with this question: when no one's looking, who are you? Who are you? Like, what are you like when you're on your own, just for yourself?
I know who I am. I like a lot of what people see. Like, I am a total hilarious goofball when I'm on my own.
Do you know, I think we all are.
Yeah. And I don't question myself. Like, when I'm alone, I'm just like, sweet, whatever. Like, I'm absolutely the run around naked, dancing, dancing, singing, all of those things. Like, when I'm alone, I don't think to question. I just be.
And it can be hard if you're always with people, because, of course, if you've got young kids, you are always with someone.
Oh, yeah, babe.
But you can even, there's a little meditation that we do in my meditation group, where we imagine that we're in a forest that no one's been in for 1,000 years, and no one is going to be in for another 1,000 years. So it's just us. Like, and you meditate on that.
That feels so good, just that.
It's like, no one's coming, and no one's ever come before. No one's going to come. It's just you. So you can also meditate on that and feel what it feels like, because initially you might be like, oh my God, that's terrifying. But it's actually so liberating.
Yeah. And you know what I instantly think, if I think about the human design thing, like, I just feel my 3 energy, like, on fire, like poking everything, trying everything out, then realizing, oh my God, now what I do with this, my 5 jumps in and goes, right, let's solve this. Like, yeah, it's also that just that little reflection is like, oh, well, my human design just jumps on in,
Yeah.
I love that.
So
I love that. Amazing. Well, it's more than that's it. That was fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And, it's going to be another big month. I feel like it's going to be a real time of, letting go of those things that don't serve us anymore. And the other thing I wanted to say about the 36 and what you were saying is, when you were saying, the kind of keeping that light from, I can't get the words. The words that you said aren't coming directly to me right now, but there was almost part of, like, instead of us, like, hiding our light or being like, no, I'm just gonna cultivate over here. When you were speaking, it almost felt like what was coming through me was like, so really value your light, focus on it, do the work. Don't worry if it's not landing yet, because what you're saying, Jenni, is like, it doesn't matter that it's not landing yet, because it's actually not quite time. You'll know when it's time because all of a sudden everything that you've been doing, focusing on your light and giving it and sharing it and developing it, all of a sudden it'll be like someone just put it on hyperdrive. So just trusting that even though you're putting your light out in the world and maybe you're not getting the results that your mind thinks you should, when you put yourself out there and you let go of the fear of being seen and shining your light, just trust that maybe it's just divine timing.
Do you know where Neptune goes after 36?
Where?
25.
Oh my God.
Innocence, gate of the spirit, love of all of humanity, love of universality. I mean, just couldn't be going anywhere nicer, right? So it's like,
Right.
we'll
Just
see,
trust.
we'll know when it's time to shine.
Exactly. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us on this transit adventure this month. It is so brilliant having you along, and I so look forward to having you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.